For 2 years, this historic hotel, built in 1886 and designed by the same architect who would go on to design the buildings in the 1904 World's Fair, was a place of suffering and pain and death. It was run by an evil man who claimed he had a cure for cancer. But what he was really doing was injecting people with poison that did nothing against their cancer, while bilking millions of dollars from suffering families. What is now the bridal suites was known as the pain ward, with soundproof doors to keep out the sound of the screaming, creepy calliope music, which you are probably more familiar with from fairs or circuses, played all day, every day. And the sound of the wheels on hardwood from the gurneys going down the hallway, delivering bodies to the freezer downstairs, still echo in this place. But that's only part of the story. And this little operation here in Eureka Springs was the tail end of something that had been going on for more than a decade. We're going to talk about the demon doctor of the Crescent, Norman Baker. But I'm going to do something that most people never do when they talk about this topic. I'm going to go into the lives of 3 of his victims, because there is a record of them. Most of the information is found in a court document held by Florida State University, which they have made available full text online. The case was Baker versus the American Medical Association, and it happened in 1931. And in the course of that case, they interviewed lots of family members. Not the patients themselves, because they were dead. But it let us know just exactly what it was like to get treatment from Norman Baker and his minions. And there were many minions. Norman Baker was born in Muscatine, Iowa on November 27, 1882. His father was an inventor who held almost 200 patents on different inventions. And young Norman learned a little bit about marketing products as he watched his father marketing his various inventions. One of the things Muscatine was famous for was their pearl button manufacturing. And as a young man, Norman worked in the factories for a short time, but Norman had a gift for influencing people. And one of the first things he did was work as a mentalist, traveling the vaudeville circuit. He created a character, Pearl Tangley, who served as the mind reader during these performances. 2 women portrayed Pearl. He married one of them very briefly, and after their divorce, he never married again. He formed the Tangley Company in Muscatine and started manufacturing air-powered calliope instruments. And while you may not recognize the name of this instrument, you have heard it. They were used in circuses, fairs, on riverboats, but they were huge and they were heavy. And Norman invented a kind of calliope that was portable. He would put it on trucks and drive through Muscatine, promoting his whatever he was promoting at the time. Tangley calliophons are prized among collectors. It's probably the only thing Baker did with his life that can be praised. And among musical historians and enthusiasts, Baker is somewhat of a legend. If his factory had not burned down, he may have continued doing that. He was making a fortune legitimately at that point. But when it burned down, he was devastated. And it's at this point he starts going down a dark path. In 1925, Baker began broadcasting a radio show, KTNT, Know the Naked Truth. The show featured his invention. It opened with calliope music. The station was placed on the highest hill in Muscatine. Baker illegally boosted the signal. Because of this, he was reaching 1 million people in the Midwestern United States. If authorities were coming to inspect the station, he would move it back to a legal level and then raise it once the inspectors left. This radio station was extremely successful, and he expanded that into the KTNT Cafe, gas station. He had a mail order and a retail business, And he also had TNT magazine, the Naked Truth magazine. And he used the radio station and the magazine to spread his ideas. He attacked people that he saw as enemies, both individual people and organizations. He really liked to go after fat cats of government, the mainstream media, medical organizations like the AMA. He was also horribly racist and anti-Semitic. In November 1929, he formed the Baker Institute, and he used his radio station to promote the institute, which he said could heal people. Baker was said to have been obsessed with curing cancer because he lost his mother to the disease. He even painted on the outside of the radio station, "For my mother," and you can see it in the photographs. Yeah, I looked up his mother. She died in 1921 at 75 years old. Cause? Chronic diabetes and gangrene of the lower extremities. The treatment was actually one being promoted by a Dr. Ozias in Kansas City. And Baker saw this, and he took 5 patients, and he said, "I'm going to use this doctor's cure, and I'm going to cure these 5 people and prove that this works." Well, all 5 of these people died. But he opened his institute and started using this cure anyway. In TNT magazine, Baker wrote, "Cancer is curable." Those 3 words, if they could get out, if they could reach the ears of every cancer sufferer in the world. I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said it was his life's mission to get this message out to the masses, to let all of these people suffering with cancer know that for all of these years, doctors, the American Medical Association, have been lying to them. That lie, that the best means of combating cancer is by operation, radium, and X-ray. Then he goes on to describe how everyone seems to be out to shut him up. He sent articles and advertisements out to all of these different magazines and publications saying that he has cured cancer, and they refuse to run them. This guy is always a victim, a whiny little victim. "Cancer is curable" became the slogan of the hospital. Baker had it written on the outside of the building. It was the first thing anybody standing in front of the building would have seen. He wanted to make Muscatine the medical capital of the world. And with so many desperate people for whom traditional treatment had not worked, people began flocking from all over. He would sponsor these huge outdoor events at the Institute where he would, quote unquote, heal people miraculously right before their eyes. What better way to reel in marks than a live show? The local press said that up to 1 million people came to Muscatine, Iowa, either seeking treatment for themselves or seeing family who were being treated. I'm sure that was great for the local economy. But authorities were very disturbed and started looking into his business practices and investigating him. And the American Medical Association said this guy is a quack. Doctors were writing articles debunking his claims. He wrote up checks that he said he would give to anybody who could prove that his method didn't work. Well, doctors were doing that every day, but anytime they ever did it, he just said, "Well, they're lying," or "They're in this big conspiracy against me." He said, quote, "The time has come when they," meaning the big medical doctors, "ought to either signify their intentions of really being interested in doing something for cancer sufferers, or forever shut up and keep still about the subject, because the world is tired of reading every few days in the newspapers where there are 20 physicians here and a few more there who are going to meet in some particular hospital in the United States for cancer research. They have been studying cancer for the last 100 years. And I'm paraphrasing here, but they never get anywhere. They never cure it. There is the light of day at Muscatine, and the doors of the Baker Hospital are wide open. And anyone who conscientiously wants to investigate as to whether or not cancer is curable surely can find it out by coming here to Muscatine, Iowa. He says maybe they don't really want to know if cancer is curable. Maybe they want to just, quote, continue patting somebody's back or pulling somebody's big toe in an attempt to cure cancer for a few dollars. He says, the doctors at the Baker Hospital do not rub backs and they do not pull any toes, but they do cure cancer. Many patients have gone home cured. Others have had years added to their lives, and others whose cases were so far advanced that they could not be cured were relieved of their pain without the use of morphine pills every 2 hours. Obviously, that claim was bullshit. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. But when you have a terminal disease, you've been told it's terminal, what do you have to lose? And Norman Baker knew that. But you're probably wondering, how could something like this keep going if nobody ever survived? The answer is quite simple. Create a problem and then solve it. Quite simply, you diagnose people with cancer who don't have cancer. See, not every tumor is cancerous. There are cysts, there are strange things that grow on our skin as we get older. Any kind of mass found anywhere that's not supposed to be there is terrifying. I had a little cyst removed from one of my fingers. It was harmless, but it was in a bad place and it hurt to open doorknobs and stuff like that. But when I first found that, I was scared to death. And some of these things can look really nasty, but they're not dangerous. But people don't know that, especially people who probably went no further than 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. That was normal back then. There's no internet to look anything up. So if a person you think is a doctor tells you something, you're going to believe them. You've probably figured out Norman Baker had no medical training, no medical experience. He'd never worked in the field at all. But legitimate doctors knew that. And when the American Medical Association called him a quack, he sued them for $500,000 for slander. The American Medical Association chose to fight. It gave them the opportunity to prove in court that his treatment was fake. But most importantly, at least from my perspective as a historian, it left a record of how his hospital operated, how they reeled in patients, what they were telling patients. It gave a view into the lives of some of his victims. The American Medical Association's argument was, we aren't being slanderous if what we're saying is true. So they brought in actual patients. Well, they brought in patients' families because all of the patients were dead. And they set about showing just how much these treatments were bunk. Not only do they not work, they cause unnecessary suffering to terminal patients and give them false hope. Now, these are Muscatine patients, but their stories are not going to be a whole lot different from anybody treated at Eureka Springs. Here are some of the things I learned from going through these court documents. Baker never gave any of the treatments himself. He was the guy promoting the place, and he was the one promoting the method he wanted those who worked for him to use to treat patients. He was also very careful and never referred to himself as a doctor. He had a series of underlings, none of whom were doctors either, but around patients, they did call these individuals doctor. So families and patients thought they were being treated by people who had medical training and experience. You definitely can't accuse Norman Baker of being stupid. Yeah, he was the boss, but since he never gave any of the treatments, he could throw those people under the bus. And pretty much that's what happened. After this lawsuit, his underlings are who ended up being punished by the court system for practicing medicine without a license, but not Norman. And this is one aspect of the story I had never given a whole lot of thought. This con required a lot of people. Here is the staff of the Muscatine Hospital. All of them had to know they were bilking these people. They were conning these people. Here are the names of some of the key players. And these are the people that patients and families were mostly interacting with. Dr. Charles Gearing. He was actually a chiropractor. Dr. Harry Hoxsey. He came from a similar institution in Taylorsville, Illinois. Hoxsey was a well-known quack of the day. His cure was known as the Hoxsey method. It was a powder that they used as a poultice. And after all of the Baker stuff, he moved on to Dallas, opened his own hospital where he bilked patients just like Baker did. There is actually a clinic in Mexico where you can still go and get treated with the Hoxsey method. It's crazy to me it's still out there and that people are still seeking it out. There were also 2 nurses who prescribed and administered treatments, Mary Turner and Myrtle Gresham. I can't remember which one, but one of these nurses, the only medical experience she had was that she worked as a receptionist for a doctor's office. Well, Norman Baker's lost this case, so let's take a moment to gather our thoughts and talk about the fact that you're spending too much money on gas. The average American spends $5,000 a year on gas, and that's insanity. I can help you with that, and it won't cost you a dime. Download this app called Upside. Here's how the app works. You go in and you look at your list here of all the deals, and I usually just go to wherever the gas is the cheapest. The cheapest is $2.81, and you're getting 24 cents a gallon back. So you claim it. Once you make a claim, you've got 4 hours to use it. It tells you where it is, and it gives you the opportunity to upload your receipt. And I do that immediately after I've done the transaction. I get back in the car, I scan my receipt, and I'm on my way, and within the next day, you get your money. So 24 cents, if you have a big tank, that's a lot of money back. And then it all builds up. You can transfer the money anytime you want right into your bank account. You can also use Upside inside the store and at participating restaurants. You just have to make sure you're at the right location and put in the code for this channel when you sign up. So every time you make more than a $5 purchase using the app, the channel will receive a 10-cent bonus for referring you. That way you can make a donation to the channel without actually having to make a donation to the channel or doing anything you aren't already doing anyway. All you have to do is put in code EXQCU. Weird, I know, but let's try this. Exquisite Cutlery. EXQ, Exquisite Cutlery. CU. Silly, I know, but I bet you remember the code now. EXQCU. To save money and to help the channel all at the same time without doing anything you weren't going to do anyway. Okay, enough of that silliness. Back to the despicable Norman Baker. If you think Norman Baker sucks, please hit the thumbs up for me to help more people learn what a big piece of crap Norman Baker was. Right now I'm going to tell you the story of a handful of patients. Reuben Atkins was 64 years old. He was a miner, and he found a mass on his neck. It was on the left side. It was located between his collarbone and his ear. If he flipped his collar up, he could disguise it. A legitimate doctor had diagnosed it as cancerous. He was still up and about, he could do light work, but he was no longer able to work in the mines. The Atkins family learned about the Baker Institute from the radio program. Elmer Evans, his son-in-law, said, "Well, we thought it might do the old fella some good." He had met Baker before, so he went to the radio station, spoke with Baker directly, who set up a meeting at the TNT Cafe with quote-unquote Dr. Gearing. Reuben asked Mr. Gearing, "Can you cure cancer?" And he said, "Yeah, we can, and we are curing it." Reuben showed him the spot on his neck, and Dr. Gearing looked at it, and he asked the doctor, "Do you think this is cancer?" And Gearing said, "No doubt, it's cancer." This is how he explained to them that they were going to cure it. The first thing they needed to do was to kill the feeders that feed the cancer. If you kill those, you take away its ability to grow. Then you put something in there to restore the tissue and tone up the system. Treatment would cost the family $50 a week. That's the equivalent of $930 in 2025. Patients were usually made to stay at least 3 weeks, sometimes longer. The family decided to try it. Reuben's daughter, Jessie, brought him back to Muscatine and dropped him off at the Baker Institute. And the next time anyone in the Atkins family saw him again was when his dead body was being removed from the ambulance that brought him back home. Son-in-law Elmer Evans described viewing his body at the funeral parlor. He said his neck looked different. The cancer had spread quite a bit. He said there were 5 or 7 little cancers all ready to break out on the left side of his body, below the collar now and under his clothes. Eva Gould found a small lump in her right side near her 8th rib in 1924. Eva and her husband Philip were immigrants from Lithuania. Philip owned a furniture store. They had 3 young daughters, the oldest of whom was 15. They immediately sought the help of a legitimate doctor. She had surgery to remove it. It was gone about 4 years, then returned in 1928. The same doctor operated again. It stayed away about a year, came back in 1929, and this time she went to Minnesota to the Mayo Clinic. They operated. 8 months later, in 1930, it was back. Doctors at the Mayo Clinic told them the only option was to do surgery again, but no doubt it would return, and every time it would come back sooner than it had the time before. The family saw no reason to have surgery again. In the summer of 1930, Eva and Philip heard a radio program about a Baker Institute located in Muscatine, Iowa. They lived in Oskaloosa, Iowa, that claimed to be curing cancer. They had no options left. They had nothing to lose. Mysteriously, TNT magazine also showed up in their mail, addressed right to Philip Gould. And inside that magazine, there were articles about how they were curing cancer. There were testimonials to people who had allegedly been cured. So they made the trip to Muscatine. They came into a reception area where there were several women who had them sign in. They paid a $10 deposit so that a doctor would examine Eva. They were shown into an office where a Dr. Statler examined Eva. He recommended she get 2 weeks of treatment. Eva was skeptical. You can cure it in 2 weeks? And he said, well, it can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks. We'll do a couple of weeks and see how it goes. If you need to stay longer, you can stay longer. So Eva stayed. She got a room in Muscatine. She did not stay at the Baker Institute. A lot of patients did that. It saved them a little bit of money, but it was still costing them $50 a week for the treatments. She went every morning for her injections. Now, the contents of the injections was revealed in the court documents. The injection consisted of 1/3 carbolic acid, 1/3 glycerin, 1/3 alcohol, and a dash of peppermint. It is true that acid will eat through tissue, but it's going to eat through good tissue as much as it's going to eat through the cancerous tissue. And the AMA argued in court, it's definitely going to do more harm than good when you put it in the hands of a moron. That's not the wording they used, but it's basically what they were arguing. Every time Eva went for a treatment, she received 5 or 6 injections under the skin. When her 2 weeks were up, they recommended she go home and rest for a week. Philip said when she got home after that 2 weeks, she was, quote, sore all over. She could not handle any more treatments without a break. After that week, they took her back to Muscatine. Dr. Statler looked her over and recommended she stay 2 more weeks, which she did. Again, she came home. This time she had a longer rest, about 6 weeks. Philip said during that second period of treatments, she lost 10 pounds, which she gained back after she got home. But after that rest, they went back to Muscatine, and they examined her, and the doctor said she needs more treatments. Philip didn't want to say no, but when they went back to they'd been talking to this Mr. Bellows, was making all these arrangements. He wasn't pretending to be a doctor. He was some sort of manager. I don't know what his official title was. But Philip protested. He said, quote, "I am a poor man and a sick man, and I can't stand $50 a week." And I said, "God knows how long it takes to cure her." Well, Mr. Bellows looked over Eva's chart and he said, "Well, it looks like your wife's doing nicely." And I asked him about maybe a special rate. And Mr. Bellows said, "Well, myself, I couldn't give you no special rate, but we will see Harry Hoxie." So we took him in to see Harry. Bellows took the chart, handed it to Philip, and said, "Here's a man that will gamble with you." So Hoxie looked Eva over. Mr. Hoxie made him an offer. "Look, for a flat rate of $250, we will cure your wife, no matter how long it takes." So Philip gave him $100 right away and said, "I'll get you the next 150 in the next 10 days. He went home. Eva stayed to get more treatments. He mailed them a check for $150. And in the subject line, he wrote, "For curing cancer." Well, Eva sent the check back to him with a note that said, "They can't accept this. You need to change that to something like, in full payment in advance for medical treatment, or full payment in advance for treating cancer." Eva called Philip and told him to come get her. She needed a break, and he had to deal with this check issue. Before leaving, they went into the office. And in the words of Philip Gould, he said, "My wife made a holler." Eva said, "Don't pay that $150. As she started screaming, she's in the lobby, and she's screaming, "You don't cure cancer!" I think they wanted in the office to talk to the quote-unquote doctor, and they wouldn't let them in there. So she became more and more enraged, and eventually Baker himself intervened. They went into his office, and he proceeded to get on to her as if she were a child. He scolded her. He told her, "We had a patient waiting to get cured of cancer, and he heard you say that we don't cure cancer, and we lost that patient." Basically implying now that that patient was probably going to die of cancer because of her. Evidently, he had a wall of photographs or a big stack of pictures, because he started gesturing towards that, and he said, look at these. This is all the cancer I've cured. All of these people cured. And here you are in my lobby screaming, "I don't cure cancer." Baker looked at her chart. Philip said, "If my wife is cured, I'll give you the $150, but I'm not giving it to you now." And Baker made it clear, quote, "Don't make any alarm when somebody else is here. If you want to talk to me, if anything is wrong, come in my office and tell me. I don't want anybody to hear it." Baker looked at Mr. Statler and said, "Finish up her treatment." Eva stayed for a few more weeks, and then she called, and she said, "I've got to have a rest." She came home. She was going to rest for 3 weeks, but she did not survive those 3 weeks. And she died November 26th, 1930. The legitimate doctor who initially had been treating her said the cancer had gone to her brain. She died at age 47, leaving behind 3 teenage daughters. After losing the lawsuit, the state of Iowa sought to shut down Norman Baker's hospital. They pursued an injunction against Baker and 4 others, including Harry Hoxie, the 2 nurses, and the chiropractor Gearing. seeking to prohibit them from practicing medicine without a medical license. This case drew national attention. In the course of the proceedings, it was revealed that the Baker Institute used a licensed doctor to sign medical orders. But the doctor wasn't involved in the cases. He wasn't prescribing the treatment. Everything had already been filled out for him and was stacked in front of him, and he would just sign them one after the other as if he were signing postcards. This doctor also revealed that Baker would have presentations where he would have women patients in front of crowds of other doctors, medical students, but the women, I guess, would be stripped and examined in front of these crowds, which, of course, to a 1930s public would have been a horrifying notion. Harry Hoxsey sued. The powder treatment was his. He had inherited it from his grandfather, so he sued Norman Baker for his share of the profits, and he had moved on. Ultimately, the 4 people other than Baker all lost that case. But Norman Baker was not included in this, and I have to assume it is because there was no evidence he ever actually gave anybody treatments himself. He always had somebody else do it. He moved his radio station to Mexico. He upped his wattage and continued his broadcasts. But as things in Muscatine continued to get worse, in the middle of the night, he moved his staff, equipment, everything they had to Eureka Springs, Arkansas. There was a hotel there. It had been built in 1886, and because of the Depression, it had fallen on hard times. It was a gorgeous building. It had had a storied history before he even got there. It had been used by the railroad. Then when that wasn't a good enough income, it had been used as a women's college. Crescent College. Evidence of that is still there to this day. And when Baker saw it up for sale, he thought, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to expand my hospital, to have a bigger operation. And as an added bonus, one of the things that drew people to Eureka Springs was its supposed healing properties. Of all of those natural springs that were said to have been able to heal any ailment you could imagine. And Baker bought it, and for 2 years, this gorgeous hotel was a place of misery and suffering and death. The hotel is basically at the top of a giant hill. It's a beautiful sight. It looks almost like a castle overlooking its kingdom. Baker renovated the hotel. In 1886, when it was built, it was revolutionary in that almost every room had its own bathroom. That was almost unheard of at the time, but it worked out great for Baker. He made everything purple, all the walls. If you walked into this lobby in 1937, everything you see before you would have been purple. He even had the fireplace painted purple. I don't know what it was about the color, but Baker was obsessed with it. I even came across a news article years later. The journalist had met with him later in his life and said he was wearing a purple suit and he was driving a purple car. It sounds like a character in a Tim Burton movie. In the patient areas, all of the hallways would have had hardwood floors. None of the patient rooms had doors. But it seems some staff lived on site, and their living quarters did have doors. And of course, the walls were purple. But he also advocated for the power of positive thinking. He said people had the ability to think themselves free of cancer if they only put their mind to it. So he really went out of his way to make it a happy place, to give this impression that positive things were happening here. So he had one of his calliopes out on one of the balconies that played that music all day, every day. And there wasn't a person playing it. It functioned like a player piano. It had songs programmed into it, and they just let it run. And that sound would have gone throughout the valley. Everybody in Eureka Springs probably would have heard it. So you can imagine this place with the suffering people, with this calliope music playing. It's like something out of a horror movie. For years, there was this rumor that Baker kept jars lining the walls. I don't know if it was in the exam room or in his office, but these jars were said to contain samples of human tissue floating in liquid, and that it was there to give the illusion of authenticity. There's real science being conducted here, real medicine by real doctors. And shockingly, just a few years ago, they were conducting a dig in the back of the hotel, and they found tons of jars full of stuff they don't even know what's in them. But the tissue samples were floating in whiskey, so he was too cheap to even use formaldehyde. And we'll come back to these bottles later on, but apparently that story was true. But in the hospital years, much of what I'm getting ready to tell you now is information that was given throughout the tour of the building that I took when I was there. Now, in addition to the history, I am also going to tell you the ghost stories that they told us. Because the hauntings at the Crescent are one of the things it's most well known for now. And there's not much better than a darn good ghost story. So if you don't believe in ghosts or you don't want to hear it, I guess you can put your hands over your ears and go la 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 while I tell the kick-ass ghost stories. This is room 502. This door leads to a staircase which went to Norman Baker's quarters. He was so paranoid, he had a secret exit installed so that he could flee in a moment's notice. He had a 6-sided desk because Baker always had so much stuff going at the same time. Multiple cons, multiple businesses. Each side of the desk was devoted to a different enterprise. And this is it. It's still there. Now it's in the lobby. Right next to the door of Baker's room is the second most requested room in the hotel, 419. Someone named Theodora lived in this room. I don't know how they got the name Theodora. She is believed to have been a nurse, and that Baker absolutely trusted her so much that he wanted to keep her close at hand, so her room was essentially next to his. This is no longer a functional door. They have taken 2 rooms and made them into one, so the bed inside the room is blocking this door. Theodora is one of the Crescent's most famous ghosts. I wish I could tell you more about her in a historical sense. But I don't even know if Theodora is her name. For all I know, she is Mary Turner, or maybe Myrtle Gresham, who came with him from Muscatine and maybe went by pseudonyms because they weren't allowed to practice medicine anymore. I just don't know. I couldn't find much about Mary Turner at all. It's too common of a name. But no matter what, I think this Theodora was filling the same role Mary did in Muscatine. The most trusted nurse, the most active, the one that had the leadership in managing all the other nurses. Theodora is seen, and people have reported talking to her. That may be where the name Theodora came from. Maybe she told somebody that was her name. She is described as an older woman who gives off a very kind vibe, and she's usually seen fussing with her bag. She's trying to find something, and she looks real. People have seen her, they've thought she looks like she needs help, and people have asked her, "Can I help you with anything?" And she says, "No, it's okay, I'm just looking for my keys." And then she disappears into that room through this door that is no longer a functioning door. And until that moment, people didn't know they weren't talking to a real person. Theodora is active among the rooms in this corner. She is a clean freak. Guests frequently report leaving their room kind of a mess. And when they come back, all of their stuff has been neatly organized and placed where it should be. But what I like about Theodora is she's not shy about letting you know how she feels about you either. There was a couple. They were going to be married the next day or the day after that, very soon. But they got in a big fight. And in the course of the fight, they said, "Fine, the wedding's off." And they stormed out of the room, and the evening wore on, and they made up, and they came back up to go to their room, and they couldn't get in. The door was blocked by something from the inside. And they pushed, and they pushed, and they finally got in to find that their suitcases were packed, and they were shoved against the door. Not included in this was the wedding stuff. The dress, the tux, they were not in the suitcase. Now, there's no evidence there was anything going on between Baker and Theodora. He did have a girlfriend. I don't know anything about her, but he trusted Theodora, so he kept her close. But there were people who did come with him from Muscatine, including J.L. Statler and R.A. Bellows, who was the manager at Muscatine. I know this because both died in Eureka Springs and are buried there. So I'm making a bit of an assumption that they came with him, but I don't have any evidence they were doing anything else. The injections people were going through were extremely painful, and people were getting these up to 7 times a day, injected directly into their tumors. And they also weren't allowed any pain medications of any kind. And that became a problem, because people who are in extreme pain make a lot of noise. So Baker decided to create what he called the pain ward, or the pain asylum. It was 2 rooms that were kind of tucked away in a corner. These rooms did have doors, and they were soundproof, so that no one could hear the sound of the screaming. These rooms are now the bridal suites. And if you stay here on your honeymoon, know that you may not be alone. A woman haunts these rooms. Numerous guests have woken up and seen a woman standing at the foot of their bed, just looking at them. She has been captured on film. It looks as if part of her jaw has been surgically removed. They have no idea who she was, only to assume she must have been one of Baker's patients, and that before she got here, part of her jaw may have had to be surgically removed. And in a last-ditch effort, she came here because nothing else had worked. Baker had become very adept at recognizing when somebody was getting close to dying. So he trained his staff to recognize this also, because they didn't want anybody dying on site, if they could help it. So 2 or 3 days before they typically saw somebody pass on, they would tell them, "Great news, you're cured. We're sending you home," in the hopes that they would die either on the train or after a couple of days of being home. And if anybody ever complained about it, they would say, "Well, we cured that person. It's not our fault if some other ailment took their life after they left our facility. It wasn't something we did. So you're not getting a refund, because we did what we promised we were going to do." Now, it wasn't always possible, though, to completely ensure that no one would die on site. And they say that they have verified that at least 43 people did die inside the hotel during the period of the hospital years. When somebody died, you've got to do something with the body. In the dead of night, the body would be placed on a gurney. It would be covered with a white sheet, and they would just hope nobody noticed that they were moving a body in the middle of the night. And one of the things many people experience is the residual of the bodies being moved. Sometimes people will wake in the middle of the night to the sound of wheels going across a hardwood floor in the hallway. And people have actually seen this woman, a woman in a nurse's outfit, rolling a gurney with the body covered in white, rolling down the hall. And if you speak to her, she does not respond. She does not look. It's just a residual, which is an event that occurred playing over and over like on a loop. Like a video recording that you keep watching over and over again. I'd like to point out that the hallway now is carpeted. So the sound of the hardwood is not something you're going to hear anymore. This brings us now to the morgue. Now, in the very beginning, in the days of the hotel, this was the kitchen. It would have had an ice box because this is before refrigerators existed. This was their ice box. It was insulated. They could put bodies here and keep them cool. They didn't always notify families right away that their loved one had died. Sometimes they were able to keep them in this refrigerator for an extended amount of time to continue to collect money from the family. In this area right here, Baker would do illegal autopsies. And no, he did not do them on this table. Apparently, all of the ghost shows always say, oh, this is the table where Baker did his autopsies. It's not true. It is a 1950s standard kitchen sink that has never had a body on it. But it does look creepy down here. And this is where he got some of the samples for his jars. The jars from the dig are on display in the basement morgue area. And this represents only a tiny portion of what has been found there. Tests have been done on one jar, which showed it does contain human tissue. What kind of tissue? Whether it was a tumor or part of a vital organ, nobody knows. And it is floating in whiskey. The rest of them, the contents, are a mystery. This black stuff here is some sort of salve that was common at that time as a topical cancer treatment. When they were excavating this, a guy was picking it up and his thumb went through the lid of the jar into this black stuff. Yuck. But lab companies are too busy solving crimes to take a look at these jars of weird stuff and try to figure out what's in them. While we don't have as much information about the patients in Eureka Springs as we do for Muscatine, there is one letter that a man's descendants sent to the hotel. They have it on display. I saw it hanging up in one of the hallways. And in it, he describes a typical day. And it's the only thing I came across that actually came from a patient. Everything else was through surviving family members. His name was Luther Baggett. Luther was born in Texas in 1893. But when he got sick, he was living in Arizona. He had a wife, Onita Howell. He had 3 children, ages 4 to 15, 2 daughters, and a son. He worked in the lumber industry as a truck driver and also did some construction work. I'm not sure what he was sick with, though, and his death certificate wasn't very helpful. According to it, he got hurt 6 months before he died. And 3 months before then, he had surgery in Phoenix. 2 months before his death, he is at Eureka Springs writing this letter in December of 1938. Whatever he was suffering with, he only refers to as his main trouble. I wish I could tell you more about what he was suffering with, but I just don't know. The letter I'm getting ready to read to you was written over the course of December 9th and 10th, 1938, and Luther would die in February of 1939. December 9th, 1938. My dear little bunch, the weather has blowed off nice and has been a pretty day. Me and an old man walked to town this afternoon, but I haven't had any mail from home yet. This is an awful out-of-way place, and mail is slow getting in and out. I will surely get something tomorrow. I sure would like to kiss my wife, big girl, little girl, and my sonny boy. Good night. Saturday morning the 10th. Have been pretty busy up to now. Castor oil at 6, tonic at 7, shaved, went to breakfast, took needle treatment, back to room, on bed with hot pack. Have just got back from a little walk and some air. Yes, and had carrot juice at 9. They say that all the medicines and food used here are made from vegetables, herbs, roots, and bark. Can't tell yet what they are going to do with my main trouble, but they sure seem to work over your blood and system. They didn't find much the matter with me. My blood was 30 points low, and my main trouble. Some people come here and they find several ailments that they didn't know they had. That makes it more expensive. One man came just ahead of me with several ailments, and they charged him $500 flat rate for 5 weeks treatment, without room. Some are saving some money rooming out, but they wanted me here in the hospital. It seems that most of them has to stay as much as 5 weeks, and some longer. Since the mail seems so slow, you had better let me know soon how you think we are going to get along financially. Guess I will try to stay the 3 weeks. If I don't stay any longer, I have $47 now. It will take $3 more for next week, $50 for the next, and about $30 for a ticket and a little laundry. About $90 more for 3 weeks. This sure has been a long week for me. And since I haven't had a letter and wondering if some of you are bad sick, I'm going to try to write to Mamie today, and I am not sure of her address. Well, the last mail has come for this week, and I didn't get a letter. Don't know what to think, and it seems there is nothing I can do about it. We'll quit and get this in the mail. Love to all. L.J.B. Luther Jefferson Baggett. I'd like to point out that despite the financial hardship this was putting on Luther's family, those were also 3 weeks he was not spending with his children and his wife. His little boy was only 4 years old. His oldest daughter was 15, and his middle daughter was 10. It is so heartbreaking, and it makes me so angry for these people. What a monster. I wish I could tell you that Norman Baker paid for his crimes. But in all honesty, he really did not. Sort of similar to Al Capone. The only thing they could get Al Capone for was tax evasion. What finally shut down Norman Baker was mail fraud. It's the only thing they could really get him for. Remember how the Goulds received that magazine in the mail? Well, that magazine was full of lies. So they were able to get him for defrauding people and using the Postal Service to do it. His punishment? 4 years in federal prison. He served his time in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and spent the rest of his life a free man. He died in 1952. He died alone. He had $13,000 left in the bank, and about 5 people attended his funeral in Florida. At the Crescent, they like to point out that 5 people went to his funeral. The Crescent had a beloved cat, Morris. He came in 1973 as a kitten and was so beloved, he was considered a member of staff, and he was given the title of General Manager. He became such an integral part of the community, not only of the hotel, but of the town, that when he died 21 years later, more than 300 people attended his funeral. They love to point that out during the tour. Our cat had more people at its funeral than Norman Baker. I took a moment to pay my respects to Morris. As you can see, people still fondly leave tributes to this beloved travel ambassador. You can still see his kitty door closed up in the wall. The Crescent currently has 2 kitty employees. I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. I want to dedicate this to everybody out there who has dealt with cancer in some way. I know what it's like, how painful it is. And anybody who would prey on people going through that is an absolute monster. And his story is so relevant Quackery is all the rage right now. Please help me out and hit like if you enjoyed this, if you learned something. Please subscribe, share with all your friends. Most of my popular stuff is demonetized, so if you feel so moved, please send me a super thanks. You can find me on Patreon and become a recurring contributor. I apologize for how long it takes me to make these, but I'm pretty thorough and I do everything by myself. So be on the lookout for quacks, con men, and swindlers. Be careful out there, my friends. I hope to see you next time. Take care.